Welcome to RHI's Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today we are here with Tina Lee-Vogt, Program Manager, Code Compliance, City of Sacramento in California.
Hey, Tina, great to see you today. And thank you for taking the time to be with me and doing this interview.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad to have the opportunity.
hmm So I sent you over some questions, but mostly I really just want to get some of your background. You kind of in an important position in the city of Sacramento, and you're really dealing with code compliance, which is what I understand you do a lot of work around, but you're also quite effective at organizing teams and networks of people to work together. But something like this doesn't just happen. So going back in your career, at what point did you decide, hey, this kind of code enforcement world is a world that I want to get involved with? What motivated you? What was your background or experiences that led to that?
So actually, I've been with the city of Sacramento a very long time. I've been with the city of Sacramento 30 years. And so I've worked in a number of different departments. And actually, how I landed in code, I always say it was a really crappy way to land in code, but it was probably the best thing that happened to me. So early in my career, I've worked in a number of departments. I started in Parks and Recreation. I worked at our convention center. I worked with our police department. Probably the department that had the biggest impact was I worked at our neighborhood services department, where I really had to work a lot with different teams. And then I'd spent a part of my career in the Department of Finance. I was in the Department of Finance administrative unit, and we had budget cuts. And my director actually said, well, you're going to be cut. So what happened was there happened to be an opening in code enforcement, and I had a chance to actually transfer there. And it was really great because the director and the operations manager said I was a bargain, and they were very happy to be able to bring me on board. So in 2009, I moved to code compliance, and I became responsible for the entertainment permit program, for which I was like, the city has an entertainment program. And it was really interesting because I had no idea that the city did it, but it was really a great opportunity. And I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And what I really love is I've had a chance to work with a really great sergeant, Sergeant Lane Polite, who's actually retired now. But he's the one who actually introduced me to the Responsible Hospitality Institute and
Okay.
to my first conference. And so the one thing I've learned throughout my city career is every successful project that I've worked on really involved a team. And when I talked about neighborhood services, what was great about that was that it was a different kind of approach to addressing problems, is that we always worked collaboratively with other departments to address and solve things. And I kind of took that same approach with me to entertainment. So I realized that it's not just code. There's a lot of different departments that are involved. And the more that you coordinate and collaborate with those departments, the more successful you are. So that's a little bit about my background. In a nutshell, I have a bachelor's in public administration and a master's in public administration. So being able to kind of take those bureaucratic tendencies and actually put them into action has been something that I really enjoy about the job that I do now.
So where's your early background? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Sacramento, in South Sacramento, to be more specific. Went to high school here. I live in the city of Elk Grove, which is just a suburb of Sacramento. And I think I really had parents who were very engaged and very involved in how kind of approaching kind of that same communicative kind of effort. My father worked for IRS for years,
Mm.
and he led teams. And so I think I kind of have my father's ability to lead teams well.
Now, I know that you spend a lot of time out on the street and interacting with the venues and observing things, and particularly through COVID, you had to be a master problem solver to kind of help the businesses at least keep afloat. And so you've actually witnessed firsthand the evolution of Sacramento, because I know that over the years it really started to become a regional destination. You had various areas of the city that were really becoming hotspots for socializing. And there were many challenges associated with that, like with code and code enforcement around sound in particular, and other types of issues. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. So how would you see what was emerging before COVID, and what do you observe now in terms of what's happening with how people are socializing?
I think before COVID, you're right, we were really burgeoning. We had some really key areas that were developing. We were really looking at developing our Old Sacramento waterfront. And so we were really trying to kind of revitalize that area. We have some really big areas at 10th and K Streets and 20th and K Streets that were really very popular destinations. And I think COVID really impacted areas differently. In Old Sacramento, there's been a lot of activity even during COVID because it's an outside area. It hasn't always been positive because some of it has been issues with noise. We've had a lot of issues with cruising. At 10th and K, our biggest impact is it's right next to the Capitol. So because of all the civil unrest, they were really hard impact. They've been closed probably the longest of our areas. They've been the hardest for us to try to keep going during COVID. Because of the situation, we had so much damage during the civil unrest. So 10th and K was really impacted. But 20th and K is a really good example of how we were able to keep things growing. We were able to do some street closures. So we had a street that we closed, and we really implemented our al fresco program where we were able to close down a small section of street, make it so that it was still accessible for our fire to get through if we needed to during an emergency. But we were really able to do a lot of outside dining and keep that area going. 20th and K is where Badlands is, which is where we have our very popular club that has their drag show that they took a nighttime club and said, let's make Sunday brunch a thing. And they went into their parking lot and they opened it up and they did a drag show in their parking lot. And it's so popular that they're continuing to do it even as we reopen. So you see how different areas had different challenges and had to approach it in different kinds of ways. So I think as we get through COVID, we're going to need to see kind of for each of those areas what they need to make sure that they can succeed based on their different challenges.
Now, you mentioned, having all this outdoor seating and everything added and the street closures. Do you see that's changed people's social behavior to where you have almost as much people out during the day because of that great experience as at night? Or do you think you've seen an increase in daytime socializing because of the way that you reconfigured the street?
I think we did a little bit. I think that we're going to see, we're definitely trying to determine how we keep al fresco going because it's something that businesses really like. It does definitely increase the ability to have more things during the day. So I do think we're going to see a shift and change. I know that our club that's doing the drag show is going to continue to offer that, as I said. So I do think we're going to see a little bit of a change. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I think our biggest challenge is going to be how we keep al fresco going when it's post-COVID, because at the time of COVID, it was the only game in town. Businesses couldn't be inside because they were restricted. But now businesses can have inside dining. And so we're not sure whether or not residents are going to continue to support the outside dining. We think that patrons will, but for residents, it's a different challenge because now you're dealing with businesses that might have twice the occupancy because they'll have people inside and outside. Again, it's one thing to tolerate it because it was the only thing people can do, but now, do you still have that same tolerance level? So that's definitely the challenges that we're looking at. But I do think we're going to see a change in dynamics in terms of how people behave in a post-COVID environment.
Do you see, I know we're still waiting to see what the California government says in terms of the reopening, particularly in terms of the return to office space, which I suspect in Sacramento is a big part of the local economy, and particularly with the restaurants and the early evening crowds leaving work and socializing. Do you see that that the office environment may impact the whole social experience for people?
Oh, definitely. Our downtown is really struggling with the fact that people aren't downtown. The problem is not it's not just people going out during lunch. It's a lot of times people would go out after work and they would have drinks or they would do different things. So I know that there's been a really big push to try to get people to return back to their offices so that we can have that vibrancy. And I think the other thing is when you don't have people, other elements kind of emerge. So when you don't have actual other, people kind of moving and working through there, that's when you see a lot more of the homeless kind of taking over areas. And so there's different challenges that come with not having a really bustling downtown. So I think we're going to see that. I think what remains to be seen is whether or not people will be coming back full time. Even with state service, we're looking at maybe a hybrid. So we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. I know for myself, working with the city of Sacramento, we're still struggling with how we're going to return that to work. And we're not saying that we're going to go back to work full time and that we might have a hybrid approach. So again, a lot of it is that uncertainty in terms of how to look at what we're going to look like post-COVID and how it's going to impact our businesses.
Now, how has, I mean, we know we're talking about COVID and return from COVID, but even during that time or prior to COVID, what were the greatest challenges you saw from a city agency perspective and other city agencies, as well as the venues? What do you see moving forward? What if, like you had mentioned before we started this, you have that group of people who turned 21 now all of a sudden massively trying to figure out how they're going to sow their oats, so to speak, in nightlife. Do you see challenges ahead? Do you see that there'll be like a boom that may eventually become a bust, if it gets too uncontrolled and unmanaged? And what do city agencies, how are you all thinking? Are you anticipating a big surge of social activity, and particularly late at night? Have you seen early indications that it may not be as much as it used to be? I mean, what is it that you see in the horizon?
I do think that we're going to see an increase because I think whenever we've like slightly opened up, we've had big crowds. I think the challenge for us is because of Sacramento, we're one of the larger cities kind of in the Northern California area. I mean, once you get past Sacramento, there's not a whole lot going on north of us in California. So we're also a regional draw. So not only do we have people within the Sacramento area, a lot of our surrounding communities come in. So I do think we're going to see a big increase. And I think one of the things that we had discussed a little earlier is kind of social skills and people just kind of understanding how to interact with each other in a social environment. And I think that's the biggest challenge. I think there's a little bit of people not understanding proper protocols when you go out to different venues. There's a little bit of people just being frustrated because they've been inside for so long, and just the niceties. I think people are just not as compliant. People challenge different things. When we used to have the mask mandates in place, there were people who were just abusive to restaurant, operators. And so they had different challenges dealing with people there, or people that were coming from areas that were less restrictive than Sacramento. So they would come in with different expectations. So I think as a city, we're trying to figure out how to set expectations for our guests so that they can have a really good experience and then support our businesses and encourage our businesses to continue to be compliant, so that they don't kind of relax and they don't have to deal with the hassle. So that's one of the challenges that we face. Again, it's just a lot of the trying to figure out and anticipate what the crowds will be like. I think we're still waiting to see what the rules are going to be here in California. The governor has said that he is going to open up the state, but we're still going to have the order in place. So we're not sure what that looks like in terms of having an actual emergency order still in place, but having the state somewhat open. So we're also trying to work with our local, Sacramento County Health Agency to see what their expectations are in terms of how we're going to do enforcement. So I think it's just what our goal is to stay in communication. Yesterday, we actually had a very successful meeting where we met with our business improvement districts as well as police, fire, myself. We're also working with our public works department because they're the ones in charge of al fresco. So again, it's really trying to anticipate what the problems are going to be and then how we solve them, and that communication and really having a good understanding of what we all do. Because I think it's one thing just to say, hey, we're doing this, but to understanding the whys and the hows and the who to talk to is a really big element for us as we move forward.
There's obviously lessons that you've learned, and things like your outdoor dining, as you've begun to say, you're reevaluating that because there's a lot of different impacts that might not necessarily be appreciated by some after the COVID crisis evolves. People may have been tolerant for certain things, but may not expect the same. But if we were to have a conversation 18 months from now, a year and a half from now, um, with the best case scenario that you look forward to, what dynamics are going to change within Sacramento, and particularly the way that you have all these different agencies working together. But I think on the bottom line of this is Sacramento was also deeply engaged in the racial justice movement and a lot of demonstrations, even a lot of issues that came out about your policing approaches. So there are those kind of legacies that will be there. And how much do you think the whole police interaction at nightlife will deal with some of these issues? Will they be more cautionary in terms of their response? Will they be more hands off to some of these crises? Or do you think you have to have a real interagency approach where a lot of things don't depend upon the police as much as they did in the past? So, where do you see 18 months from now the whole world of city agencies interacting with venues and the evolution of the social economy?
Honestly, I would probably say that our model throughout this didn't change. I mean, I think that we continue to have our same really good communication with our businesses. Police, code, and fire continue to work really closely with them. I think in terms of the entertainment team, I can't say in terms of the entire Sacramento Police Department, but I think with our um, entertainment team for police, we really have kind of stayed the course. We've continued to have our officers go out and work with our businesses. A really good example, and one of the issues that we're dealing with now is at our 28th and J Streets. We've been having some issues with violence. We've had some gang activities. We actually had a meeting where, again, we met with the local business improvement district. We met with the businesses. We, had police there, and we really talked about a global approach. And part of that approach is our police department is going to work with them to train their security so that they can identify gang members, they can keep people along and get rid of loitering, we can address parking. So I think for us, it's really continuing with our model, but just being receptive to the change in the environment because it works and it's effective. And I think what's really different about our police department entertainment team is that probably more so than any other part of the police department, they're more facilitators than enforcers. So it's more identifying a problem and trying to figure out how we solve it versus just trying to crack down on things. So we really try not to go in with a heavy hand, but really go in with solutions in mind. So if I'm looking out 18 months from now, I think we're going to continue to try to do that. But I think it's trying to figure out how we do it in this different environment because it's just not going to be the same as it was in 2019. And so we're dealing again with a different crowd. We're dealing with people that, again, I just don't think people understand how to almost socially interact with people because they've been in their houses for so long. One of our jokes is it's like the roaring 20s.
See an emergence of that kind of interaction, but you're maintaining your systems that were working before. Well,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
has been a good interview, very insightful. You shared a lot of a lot of good examples of the value and the importance of this interaction and team building, as well as engaging the venues with that positive interaction and bringing them resources to help them to figure out how they could take on more responsibility for security and safety and not necessarily leaving it up to the city or the police in particular to take on that responsibility. So you're bringing them on as a partner rather than looking at them as the cause of the disorder and the disruption that's happening. So, a great work, Tina, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with me, and look forward to in the future. Anything in conclusion you want to say?
I mean, I think the main thing is thank you for all the work that you and your team do, because I think that it's really helpful to be able to learn from other agencies and to really get a really good perspective. And I know that there's a lot that our team takes away. Really looking forward to being able to meet with everybody in person, hopefully in DC,
Mhm.
like next year.
Yeah.
And I think that there's just a lot to be gained from the model that you guys have put together in terms of being able to have us connect with each other and share what we know. So thank you for the amazing work that you and your team does.
Well, thank you, and good luck, and I look forward to working you in the future.
Okay, thank you.